Up today on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, myself, Trent, Condon, joined once again by LeShun Daniels. Been a while since LeShun and I been able to talk. This schedules with the Christmas holiday always crazy, but we're together and we got plenty to break down. From Gary Barta and the Iowa Swarm, the back and forth that continues there, to yes, we have a bowl game this week. What are we going to see with this new look possible Iowa football team? A lot of questions, frustrations, and a whole lot more. All coming up today on Locked On Hawkeyes.
Are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. I'm Trent Condon, joined by former Hawkeye running back LeShun Daniels. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen each and every day. Available wherever you get podcasts. You can also watch our mugs here on YouTube. You can see us there. While you're at YouTube, hit that subscribe button and help us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. As we count down to kickoff, it's Iowa, Kentucky. And boy, LeShun, it feels like a lifetime ago, that Nebraska game and the season coming to a conclusion. Boy, there's just been so much that has happened over this last month.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it always felt long between the end of the season until we got to the bowl game before. But with how fast things move in the college football landscape now, I mean, especially with early signing day, the transfer portal, it almost feels like you're in an entirely different season once you get to the bowl season. So yeah, that was a long time ago. Um, over almost over a month. It's almost been over a month now. So by the time you see the Hawks back on the field again, it's going to be entirely new look team. We're going to have a bunch of new players in and contributing. So it's going to be exciting, to see some of these guys getting in action this week.
So you've obviously played in bowl games. There was the low water mark of the Rose Bowl after that season, and that long layoff that was in between. We haven't talked, I don't think, a ton about that game, but I'm of the mentality. Maybe it was just because I spent a lot of money to go out there, and I'm trying to maybe soothe the blow a little bit of the way the game played out there. But you guys invested so much throughout that season. That devastating loss to Michigan State in the championship game. I know you guys are excited to go to the Rose Bowl, but being that close to being in the college football playoff, to getting your shot against Alabama, would it have gone well? Well, we'll never know. But to be that close and to have what ultimately was kind of a consolation prize, it just felt like the air was kind of taken out of the team after that one. And it didn't matter if you're playing Christian McCaffrey and Stanford or anybody else. The team, it was difficult to get up for that game. Do I read that right?
So I'm never gonna say that we weren't up for the challenge and obviously playing in biggest bowl game we've been in a very, very long time. And say like we weren't ready, like excited and ready to play for it. But it was a little disappointing. I mean, like first off, just looking at everyone in the locker room kind of after that Big Ten title game and just like the faces around and just you could just tell like how much like that loss hurt because I mean we knew how much was at stake. I mean, to be the team to go into the college football playoffs would have been an amazing honor, and to get a chance to play the eventual national champs Alabama would have been pretty awesome too. But it's such a different time because you get rid of a bunch of that momentum that you've kind of built up over the year at that point, and then especially when you come off a loss, and now it's been a while since you've been on the field, and now you're trying to get back into the swing of things, and a month has passed, and then by the time you get to the bowl game, it's like, okay, it's almost like you went through a mini fall camp or a mini spring ball again, and now you're trying to get yourself back up and back to playing at a high level of football. And unfortunately, in my years when I was at Iowa, we didn't really end up playing up to that standard in the bowl game. So I'm not going to say that anyone wasn't excited to play in the Rose Bowl, because we understood how big the Rose Bowl is. Like, I mean, it's like that's what they call the granddaddy of them all, right? I mean, it was that game especially for Big Ten teams. But knowing how close we were to being in the playoffs and an opportunity to compete for a national title, which sounds crazy when you think of it from an Iowa football perspective. Uh, it definitely hurt. It hurt a bunch, and I feel like it definitely probably dragged on us probably more than a typical loss might have.
So we turn our attention to this year's team, and they rip off the 4 straight wins. Hey, see, we told you we got this thing figured out, and then it all comes crashing down against Nebraska. You lose that one. Don't get your rematch shot in the Big Ten championship game against Michigan. You don't get that opportunity. A lot of questions about what this offseason is going to look like for Iowa football. Just take us through a little bit preparation, getting ready for a bowl game. You went through a tough end of the season the year previous that we just talked about in 2014. It did not go well in that bowl game. It was a splitting time, the self-proclaimed Hawk Slayer Bowl and the Tax Slayer Bowl against Tennessee. I mean, that thing was ugly. You had your boy Parker throwing the ball in one of the craziest plays. It was ugly out there, but just that preparation, getting ready for it, and knowing a season ended poorly. And how you get your team ready to go, knowing that that's still kind of lingering in the background of everything that you're doing.
Yeah. So, kind of as I think back to like my bowl experiences, my freshman year, I was still a deer in the headlights. I had no idea what was going on, so I didn't really have too much of an opinion back then in 2013 when we played LSU. But in 2014, and especially because I was out for basically like half that season, um, I definitely saw a lot of things, like just kind of from the background, how preparation went and how we kind of prepared for that game, especially because we had such a disappointing year that year. And I feel like I may have mentioned this before, but that bowl season preparation was different than any of the other 3 years in my time there, and that's for sure. Like it wasn't like a typical, spend a lot of time working on developmental work, getting your guys kind of back healthy and things that you normally expect from bowl preparation. That year was kind of like, okay, we're bringing it back to essentially kind of like fall camp or
Mm.
in the thick of spring ball. And basically, we were just kind of going at it almost essentially every single day, just because the staff didn't like the way that we really essentially were performing throughout the year, and really got away from what Iowa football was really all about, and that is being tough, being smart, being physical, and being able to finish football games. Because that season, there's a lot of games that we didn't finish that we should have, and that was a grueling bowl prep. It felt like every single day we was out there uh going, whether it was 9-on-7, 1-on-ones, box drills, third and shorts, like focusing on a bunch of that, and um really getting back to doing what we do. And then my other times there, it was really, really focused on a lot of developmental work, because now I see a bunch of guys that have played a bunch. You've played a bunch of football throughout the entire year. You've got a bunch of work in, and now that time is spent to help you get healthy if you have any injuries or any ailments or anything like that. And I see get your reps in when you can to at least keep you sharp and ready to go. And then once we get into a week and a half, a week before game day, then you get back into really your normal routine. But a lot of that time is spent on developmental guys. So a lot of the young guys who didn't play a lot of football, who weren't playing as much on Saturdays, or you were on the scout team a bunch. That's where a lot of that development part gets put into place, because now it's like, okay, you want to start building some momentum as you get into finish the end of the season, get into spring ball. And so then next football season comes rolling around, that those guys have a lot more experience, a lot more ball under their belt, and they'll be in a better position to contribute.
Well, the preparation is basically over. We're going to talk about this game a little bit more. What we expect to see, of course, it'll be a new quarterback out there. Joey Labas is going to get the start for the Hawkeyes. We'll talk about him, our expectations, some changes, maybe even some wrinkles for this Iowa offense. Is that real? We'll talk about that as we continue here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season basketball, they have it all at BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts and listen to us, so I guess that you do, you can find those also at BetOnline. Always the fastest and easiest way for your sports betting information. Head to the website today or hop on your phone to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Trent, Condon, LeShun Daniels back with you here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen each and every day. If you are on the podcast side, hit us with a 5-star review. Always appreciate that. You can also leave reviews on Apple and hit us up on YouTube and hit the subscribe button to help us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. All right, LeShun, let's turn our attention to what we're going to see on Saturday. Alabama K-State will be happening at the same time. Maybe that's a good thing, as most of the nation, I'm sure, going to be watching that thing. The over-under, speaking of BetOnline, is I saw it circa. They're down to 30.5 now for the total in this game. One of the lowest in college football history. We've talked about that a couple of times this year with this Hawkeye team. Limited offensively. You got Joey Labas making his first ever appearance in a college football game as backup Carson May. Obviously, he's never played before. Sam Laporta, the tight end, he is your emergency quarterback if it gets to that point. And this is an offense that was also, by the way, ranked 130th in the country. It is, I know Kentucky's got opt-outs. I know they got their own set of issues over there, but it's incredibly difficult to imagine a scenario where this Iowa offense is going to come out there, look like they're humming. But can you sell me something that can give a little bit of hope that we'll see at least a glimmer of something good offensively?
No.
Oh, no.
I'm not going to say that it's not going to look like a different offense on the field. I mean, it will, because you got a new guy under center. And naturally it's going to bring different challenges, different excitement, different, because you don't know what you're getting under center. Honestly, you've seen them during the fall, you've seen them in the spring, but you haven't seen them in a real game action. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how Joey plays, and the kind of fire and excitement that he brings to this Iowa offense. I mean, hopefully, he goes out and just lights it up, right? I mean, like that would be something for sure. But I don't think it's going to be drastically different than what we've seen throughout this year. But you never know. I mean, especially in bowl game. I mean, you definitely want to win your bowl game. You never want to go out and essentially just waste a trip and go out there and play crappy, right? No one wants that. But you do have an opportunity to really kind of show not only yourselves, like, okay, this is the type of work we've been putting in. This is how we've improved over this past month. We didn't just kind of sit there on our butts, right? We installed some different things. We added some new wrinkles. We're focusing on using some of our players' strengths a lot more. But you also get the opportunity to show fans, potential recruits, and things like, hey, what we saw during the season isn't something that's going to be sticking with us moving forward, right? So you do have the opportunity to show, like, hey, we have the ability to open it up, to use some of our skill guys a little bit more effectively and get them the ball in space and create some explosive plays versus what we've been doing, so far this year. And especially with the new quarterback in Joey, because you would expect that Cade's not going to be coming to Iowa and just expecting just to sit on the bench, right? I mean, there's going to be I'm assuming they're still going to compete. It's going to be a competition, but you would expect Cade to come in and you be the starter. But if I'm Joey, like, I look at this as an opportunity, like, hey, well, I essentially have nothing to lose. I might as well go out here and just try and light it up, just try to make plays and create explosives, because worst comes to worst, you play terrible, you throw 3 picks, right? And it is what it is, right? You lose the game. We all move on, we forget about it. And then K comes in to be the starter, or he comes in, he lights it up, shows that, hey, I can play at this level, I can play at a high level, I can compete. Like, you're not just gonna forget about me because you get a really good transfer quarterback in here. So there's a bunch of things that I'm kind of excited to see a little bit more as be seen this bowl game against Kentucky, and then especially with Caleb Johnson, because I know that he hasn't been involved in the pass game as much throughout the football season, and I know he's missed some blitz pickups here and there, but hopefully that's something that's been corrected, and you can obviously get him involved a little bit more and get the ball in his hands. And I'm just excited to see some of these young guys actually get an opportunity to play this weekend, see what type of ability that they have.
Out on the practice field today. This will be their final real practice before the game begins. They have the day off tomorrow, and then they'll have a walkthrough on Friday. It was Brody Breck back out there on the field. Certainly important to have as many guys as possible in that wide receiver group. I'm really excited to see Deontay Vines too. I know we just saw glimpses. He had that wrist injury back in fall camp, and it took him a while to get back, a broken wrist. He was not able to be part of the team until the back half of the year, but there were glimmers, just little glimpses from him. He's got a chance. Nico Ragaini's going to come back for his 6th season now of eligibility. You still need more, right? I mean, all the young guys, we'll see if any of them hit. But at this point in time, I know they're still looking in the transfer portal for probably a couple more receivers to help out. But one of the guys, we want to see Joe Labas just to see if there's anything there. And even at minimum, if he's a competent backup, right? I mean, if he goes out there and just completely craps the bed, and you might be thinking, all right, we have to look another direction, even for backup, because McNamara himself, he's coming off an injury. You got to have that backup spot also ready to go. So you're going to have that component. But yeah, Caleb Johnson, we've talked about him a ton this year. He has been the revelation, and maybe the only revelation out of this Iowa offense this year, coupled with, Vines. He's a guy I think that has a chance. Is he going to be an all Big Ten wide receiver? I don't know about that, but can he be a solid guy that you go out and for the next couple of years, you're going to get 35, 40 catches a year. He's going to be, a solid complement to that wide receiver group. From the little bit that we saw from Vines, he's a guy that I want to see a little bit more out of in this game, and he's certainly going to get a lot of run. And one thing I mentioned to LeShun yesterday, did you play with anybody that was trying to play 2 sports at Iowa? Because we have this with Brody Breck, right? And Brody, he throws 99. His future, he's not going to play in the NFL as a wide receiver. I'm sorry. If we've seen nice tall target, he can do some things. He's fine. But if he's ever going to play a professional sport, it's going to be in baseball. I do wonder, trying to juggle these 2 sports, how difficult it is. This might be the last time out there for Brody Breck and say, look, I got to concentrate on baseball now. I got to run out the tunnel at Kinnick. He grew up a Hawkeye fan. That's what he wanted to do. Got to catch some passions for the team. Now it's time to concentrate on baseball. And no, this is all speculation. I don't have any information about that, but I do wonder about that component of it too. One final time to go around, and that means you need even more help at the wide receiver in the future.
Yeah. I mean, when you have, so it's interesting because we've heard him talk he's really, really good at baseball, but it's like football is like his first love. Like that football is the thing that he essentially wants to do. But I'm sure it's going to get to a point, and he could even be as soon as after this week, right? And it's where you sit down with those parents, sit down with baseball coach, sit down with your parents, and it's like, look, like, I think this is where you should honestly be spending more of your time. Because I mean, if you can throw 99, I mean that's impressive. That's impressive, and those guys aren't just walking around everywhere. And when you have that kind of ability, you might want to look at, hey, let me start moving that direction and start focusing that way. I mean, it's very, very difficult to place 2 sports, especially at a high level. I mean, I remember I was watching this thing and Deion Sanders was talking about, him being an MLB and then him playing the NFL. And he said that it was just way too difficult to play baseball in addition to being at a high level football player. And I feel like Brody's going to be in a position where it's like, yeah, I love football. It's my first love. Like it's what I really would love to do. But I feel like this potential is going to be, hey, I have this opportunity to be an MLB and be drafted right at a relatively high pick over the next few years. So you decide to go and go that route, and that does happen. Yeah, we're going to need a lot more help at the receiver position, more than we already do. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that does develop over the next few months.
One thing I want to talk to you maybe next week about after we get through this bowl game is about those end of season meetings that you have with Coach Ferentz. And kind of the way those go down. We don't have to get into any particulars unless you want to, of course, but it's just kind of how those go down. I think that'll be interesting for everybody out there listening in and find out exactly what those conversations are like and what your future with the program is going to be in that, because there's going to be plenty of things out there. I believe they have 5 open scholarships for next year, but even after this bowl game, there's going to be more people that enter the transfer portal. You're going to see that happening in all these different bowl games. That onslaught of people right at the end of the regular season that when the portal opened up, went in there, you're going to see another group, I think, after these bowl games that are also going to jump into that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more next week. A couple other things. So we have talked a lot of different angles. We've talked about this football team. We broke down offensively what they're going to be. Questions remain. What is the staff shakeup, if anything, is going to happen here after the season gets done? And we'll have plenty of time to dive into that. But LeShun, I want to get your perspective in this changing environment of college athletics. And we've talked about just the crazy nature right now of what's happening with NIL, with these collectives, and the back and forth that has happened over the last week with the Iowa Athletic Department and Iowa Swarm. Now, these are two separate entities. Athletic departments cannot create collectives. This is something that has to be done independent of the athletic department. And we've heard Brad Heinrichs, who runs the Iowa Swarm Collective. Now, he has been pretty outright in talking about some of the things that he was hoping to get from the athletic department, the biggest being getting phone numbers, getting email addresses for the season ticket base, and the unwillingness from the University of Iowa to do that, and also talking about Title IX implications. I mean, it's an onion. There are a ton of layers to this story, but from an outsider perspective, it's frustrating to see right now, knowing that this is a new reality in college athletics. You're going to have to spend. Cade McNamara wouldn't be a Hawkeye without the Swarm Collective. There's no doubt about it. The Swarm Collective is the one that landed him more than anything. And because of that, the unwillingness from the athletic department to help out the Swarm as much as possible, I don't know. It seems short-sighted from my viewpoint. How do you see it, LeShun?
Yeah. It's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating because how fast everything is happening right now in college football. And we know that in general, Iowa is typically slow to adopt things. And, with this Storm Collective, they actually kind of got ahead of it almost and kind of stayed up to pace with it. But the fact that essentially that the Swarm and the athletic department are essentially butting heads and kind of going at it makes this situation much more difficult than honestly what it needs to be, right? I mean, if you want to get some of the best players in here and you want to continue bringing in that revenue that you're looking for as the athletic department here at the University of Iowa, like that's something that's going to have to be um, prioritized. And right now, it feels like it's almost like they are trying to not necessarily kill it, but kind of keep it on the low and kind of push it to the side, like, oh no, like we're okay, kind of doing what we're doing right now, and we're gonna leave it at that. But with how fast college football is shaping out and how much NIL is influencing um, the schools that players go to, it's already difficult enough to get people to want to come to school in Iowa. I mean, realistically, like I mean, if I'm from Florida or if I'm from California or I'm from Georgia or elsewhere, right throughout the country, and I have a choice between going to the cold and playing in Iowa, or I can, kind of stay in my area and maybe play at a maybe school that's not as good or whatever. But um, that's kind of the battle that you're in, and then especially when you're trying to get these highest level recruits, like this, the NIL stuff can't be put to the back burners, right? It's something that's going to have to be focused and prioritized, and the athletic department is going to have to help in that. Uh, in that process, because if you don't, you're going to be left behind. And not saying that Iowa doesn't get good recruits, but there's nothing wrong with getting higher star recruits, better football players in, and prioritizing that NIL is important. And it sucks. Like if I'm playing in a smaller sport here at Iowa, and I'm not getting the type of revenue that the football team or basketball teams are getting. But fortunately, it is what it is. That's the reality, and I know that they want to make it fair for everyone, but fortunately, it's not realistic. It's not realistic. So you feel like you definitely have to go hard in one direction and starting off the way strong now versus trying to get everything exactly right and perfect so it's fair for everyone. And I feel like that's going to take too long, and then I was going to be way, way, way behind, and it's going to end up putting us in a bad position.
Yeah, you just can't afford it, and this is the reality. And I just, it's very disappointing to see that other people out there, Ohio State, Michigan, North Carolina, some of the examples that Brad, who runs the Iowa Swarm, has mentioned how the athletic departments are working hand in hand and trying to make it as easy as possible. And Iowa, who already has enough hamstrings, as he mentioned, that just makes it so difficult for them to recruit at that kind of level. They're just making it even more difficult. Shouldn't be the case, but that's where we are. We're going to wrap things up on the other side. We'll make some picks for the bowl game. We'll make our picks, of course, for the Iowa-Kentucky game. Take a look at some of the Big Ten and, of course, the college football playoff matchups. We'll get into that here, presented by BetOnline, when we come back on the other side. And also, we haven't talked to LeShun since signing day, and Kadyn Proctor at the 11th hour making the decision. He's going to Bama. We'll see what LeShun thinks about that. That's as we continue here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent, Condon, LeShun Daniels back with you one final time on Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less. Instant reaction, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, LeShun, as we wrap things up, I got to get your perspective. So Kadyn Proctor, it was a huge conversation piece for really that week leading into signing day. And of course, what happened? He takes a trip to Alabama and completely changes his commitment. It's not decommitting. Happened all the time. In fact, you were committed to Boston College. Is that right? You
Yep.
decommitted. So
Yep.
it's not that. It's the way this played out and the scenario where it looked like maybe he had cold feet, whatever it was, and waited until the very last moment before he finally made that decision. He's also an in-state kid. He's also a 5-star. And there's just so many more parameters. This is not your everyday decommitment and committing somewhere else. There was a lot more to this story. So again, as a guy that decommitted himself, how you thought that went down and your thought processes behind Kadyn Proctor now at Alabama.
Yeah. So, for starters, I'm not too upset with them. I mean, how can you be, right? I mean, first off, I did the same thing. You're 17, these kids are 17, 18 years old, and they're trying to think of the best decision for themselves, right? And it can be frustrating from our perspective as fans when you see that happening, especially when it happens so late like that from an in-state kid, and you've been watching them for so long, and you're like, yeah, we can't wait to get this guy. But you can't be too upset about it just because they're doing what they think is best for themselves. And it does suck that it kind of just happened uh like last second, almost like a blind side. Because mine was a little bit different. Granted, I wasn't as highly as recruited, but I did tell like the coaches, like before, like from coaches that were recruiting me, like at the time, like when I was committed to Boston College and they fired their coach, and I'm like with the new staff, I'm like, my recruitment is open at this time. Um, uh, so even though I am committed, I'm still like looking at other places to see if there might be a better fit, just because I formed a connection with the past staff. It wasn't with you guys. And now I'm opening up to different schools, and then obviously open the door here. But with him, it did kind of suck that it was like, I'm locked in. I'm here. I'm coming here. Like I just want to take these visits just to take them, yada yada yada, and then it ends up being the situation like, actually, I like this a lot better. So it can definitely be a little bit frustrating, but I can never blame a kid for doing what he thinks is best for him. Yeah, it sucks from our side of things, but uh I didn't appreciate how nasty some fans were being to him, and especially to his family. Like a lot of that stuff is honestly was just uncalled for. Um because and that's something, especially with the transfer portal and how college football is now, that's something you never want to shut the door on, especially with kids coming to schools and then deciding it's not for them and they decide to transfer. Right? That's you never want to burn those bridges, and it can be frustrating from a fan's perspective, but he was just doing what's best for him. It sucked the way that it went down. You would have appreciated if he just kind of never committed to Iowa to begin with,
Mhm.
and kind of just left it open. But hey, it is what it is. It happens. Um, you can't really be too upset about it until really that kid signs to that dotted line. I mean, he wasn't the only one to flip commitments in the last hour. I think a kid committed to a school, then decommitted, committed to another school, and then committed to another school, like all in like 24 hours, right? So like he's not the only person to do it. Um, Sometimes kids they just get cold feet, like you said, and um they just want to make the decision that's best for them. So you can never be too upset about it, and you can't put too much stock into it really until they do sign on that dotted line.
No doubt about it. Good stuff, LeShun. Out of you, and we got plenty more to talk about here in the coming weeks and the ever-changing world of college football. All right, why don't we wrap things up here? Just a couple of picks here. Our picks, as we've done all season long, presented by BetOnline, and taking a look, of course, at the Iowa matchup that will be 11 a.m. Central Time as they take on Kentucky. Iowa currently a 1-point favorite in this game. The over/under, as mentioned earlier, 30 and a half. What do you got? Who you taking, Hawkeyes or Kentucky?
So I'm actually feeling pretty good about the Hawks for this game, to be honest. I mean, even throughout the season, and Kentucky had Will Levis as their quarterback, and he's projected to be a first round talented guy, and they were still bad. Like they were still bad. And when now you have him opting out of the draft, and now you're gonna have whoever they have for their second string guy. Um, you're not expecting that they're going to be playing that much better from an offensive perspective, and they haven't been great offensively with a first round talent at quarterback. So obviously Iowa, we had our own opt outs, and Steve Spencer's not going to be playing, and Alice decided to transfer, and now it's down to Joey. So like, yeah, we're going to be hurting essentially on the quarterback side experience wise, but our offense wasn't that great to begin with the entire season. So it's
Yeah.
like it can't be that much worse. And we know how good the defense has been all football season. So I would expect them to continue to play lights out defensively and um, really, really kind of suffocate this Kentucky football team. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about the Hawks actually this
I'm feeling good about the under. I know it's one of the lowest ever in college football, but unless we have defensive scores in this game, and that very well could happen. I mean, Kentucky, they're down to more than likely a true freshman that hasn't played much, and they're down to their third, even fourth quarterback. Deuce Hogan does not look like he's going to go. And for Hawkeye fans that were sad to see Deuce go, well, he wasn't able to make it happen at Iowa. Now Kentucky with their quarterback situation, it might be more of a talent problem on that front. But that aside, who's going to make a mistake? I think that's really what it comes down to here. Two quarterbacks that have very little playing time, if at all, as we know with Joey Labas. Ultimately, I lean on the Iowa defense. And because of that, I'm going to take Iowa, but I love the under in this game. I think it's going to be destined for 13-10, a 9-7, something like that. I think it's going to be ugly. Hopefully, maybe a safety decides it. I mean, wouldn't
week.
that be great? Jack Campbell making a tackle, getting another safety as he did in the first game of the year against South Dakota State. Maybe that being the difference here. But yeah, I'm going to jump aboard with you, and we both like Iowa this weekend. And it's ultimately, when you're looking at these two teams, pretty good defensively. Iowa's better defensively. Two struggling offenses. Kentucky's a tick better there. But another huge factor is Iowa's special teams is a lot better than Kentucky's this year. And that's kind of the way that sways me over the edge. Two more picks, LeShun. Let's jump to the college football playoff. After the Iowa game wraps up, we'll be getting ready for Michigan TCU. That'll be game one of the playoff matchups from the Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Michigan. Currently a 7.5-point favorite in this one. LeShun, I think this game goes one of two ways. Either it's tight, it comes down to the fourth quarter, and TCU again escapes and finds a way to win the game, or Michigan blows them out. And I think it's going to be the latter. I think Michigan will control the line of scrimmage. They're going to make things incredibly difficult for Max Duggan to be able to do much of anything. TCU, they've lived a very charmed life this year. I believe it's 5 different times that they have faced backup quarterbacks throughout the course of this season, either for a full game or a half of a game. I'm going to take Michigan. I'm going to lay more than a touchdown. Give me the Wolverines -7.5.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with Michigan in this one. I mean, that first off, their offensive line is fantastic at three, like all Big Ten players, all American center. I mean, fantastic offensive line that can move the line of scrimmage, and then they're great on the defensive line. And I feel like they're going to get after Max Duggan quite a bit defensively, and they're just going to run the ball, run the ball, basically all day long. And the only way I feel like TCU ends up winning this football game is if they can stop that run and force JJ McCarthy to go out there and make big plays with his arm. We've seen him do it against Ohio State. We'll see if he does get forced in that situation, can he do it again? But I'm not feeling too confident for them to be able to do that. So yeah, give me Michigan for this one.
And the nightcap, it is Ohio State, Georgia, down at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. The Peach Bowl, 7 o'clock kickoff with the Buckeyes and Georgia. LeShun, your dad played there. You're an Ohio kid. You're taking the Buckeyes, aren't you?
So it's interesting. I actually do kind of feel okay about Ohio State for this one,
Yeah.
shockingly. But with how big I feel like the line is what is it, touchdown, I think?
6.5, yep.
Yeah, it's a touchdown. I feel like it's gonna be close. I feel like it's gonna be like a three kind of real tight game. It's gonna be whether decided by a field goal or a 2-point conversion at some point in that football game. And I like Georgia keeping it closer than I like Ohio State keeping it closer than that touchdown. I don't know if Ohio State pulls it out. That Georgia team is really good. They don't make a lot of mistakes offensively, and they play lights out defense. And we saw what happened last time Ohio State was out there. They made a bunch of mistakes offensively, weren't able to stay on the field and get points. And I feel like that's something that's going to possibly be their downfall in this game again. But who knows? We'll see. The last time Ohio State was in the playoffs as what were they? They were able to beat Clemson in a lights out game by Justin Fields. And, we'll see if CJ Stroud can provide that type of spark for the Buckeyes in this one. But I feel like they keep it closer than touchdown, but Georgia does pull it out.
So my big thing about this game is they're motivated. It's not a motivation factor. It's just how you get off the mat after that loss to Michigan, just completely falling apart in the fourth quarter in that fashion, looking like, at least at the time, well, there's really not a realistic path to get into the college football playoff. And then you get in, but you're facing this behemoth in Georgia. Now, where CJ Stroud is mentally, he's thinking about the NFL draft and getting ready. And this is going to be, I think, say a lot about Ryan Day. I love the coach third base moniker that Harbaugh put on him last year. It's something that sticks with me. I absolutely love it. I love the shade being thrown and the rivalry aspect of that one. But this is going to be for Ryan Day. I think this is going to say a lot. This is a guy that's lost 2 Big Ten games in his career. And yet people are saying, well, I'm not sure if he's the right guy. That shows you the pressure cooker also that is Ohio State and coaching in that kind of environment and what the expectation level is. Because of that, and because we've seen so many blowouts in this game, I think I'm going to lead Georgia. I'll play the game. I bet on everything. Of course, I'm going to play it ultimately. By the time we get around to Saturday, I know I'm going to have a bet. And if I had to put it in right now, I think I'd lay the 6.5 with Georgia, but motivation, because I love the Buckeyes talent. I think they can compete with them. I just wonder about the headspace mentally, where this team is and what Day's been able to do, kind of pull them back up and get them ready. So that's kind of at least my read on things, but we will see. Opposite sides, Buckeyes plus the 6.5 for LeShun. I'll lay it with the Bulldogs. Well, LeShun, hey, it was good catching up with again. How's Christmas? Everything good?
Yeah, it's good. Headed up to Pittsburgh and sat in that coldest football game I've ever been in my entire life. But it was good. It was good being around the fam, and it was just a great time. So I can't really complain about it, except for sitting in that sucked. That sucked. But it was a good thing that the Steelers won.
See, now you know what us fans actually have to deal with,
I've never been so cool at a football game in my life. Because usually I'm running around, right? And this time I'm sitting there.
Wait. Now what's going on? Your brother just signed a new contract. He's got you guys in the stands. He didn't get a suite for you guys?
That's what I'm saying. He was like, we got there and he was like, I probably should have got a box. Oh well. I'm like, well, you guys way too late now. Whatever.
Next time, right? Next time. Make sure that one happens.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. LeShun, great catching up. Hope you had a Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you again in 2023, and we will recap what we see with the Hawkeyes matchup against Kentucky. Have a good one, LeShun.
Likewise. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends with the Locked On Sports Today podcast. For your second listen, check out Peter Bukowski as he brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Analysis and opinions from everyone on our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. That's LeShun Daniels. I'm Trent Condon. We'll be back with you again tomorrow with more previewing Iowa, Kentucky. LeShun will join us again next week, and we got some basketball to talk about. We'll preview Iowa, Nebraska as the Hawkeyes get back on the hardwood. That's all coming up on tomorrow's episode. Thanks for joining us today on Locked On Hawkeyes.